The invitation was sent with a smile. Gold lettering, private venue, a night for friends only. The Mafia boss's wife laughed as she typed the name into the guest list. "Invite the maid," she said. "Let's see how she dresses." The room erupted. "She won't even show up. She won't know how to act." Perfect. The night of the party arrived. Crystal lights, silk gowns, champagne flowing like water. Then the doors opened. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Because the woman who stepped inside wasn't confused, wasn't nervous, wasn't out of place. She walked in calmly, head high, eyes steady, wearing something no one expected. And in that moment, the laughter froze. The Mafia boss's wife felt her smile slip, because this wasn't a joke anymore. And everyone in that room suddenly realized they had invited the wrong woman to humiliate. Stay with me until the end, because what this woman reveals next will turn that joke into a reckoning. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Isabella Martinez had worked for the Romano family for 3 years. Every morning at 5 sharp, she entered through the service door of their mansion. She cleaned marble floors that cost more than most people's homes. She polished windows that overlooked gardens worth millions. She dusted furniture older than some countries. And through it all, she remained invisible. That was exactly how Vivian Romano preferred it. The Mafia boss's wife had very specific ideas about who belonged in her world and who existed merely to serve it. To Vivian, Isabella was furniture with legs, useful, replaceable, beneath notice. But invisibility has its advantages. When you're invisible, people forget you have ears. They forget you have eyes. They forget you have a mind that processes everything you see and hear. Isabella had learned the Romano family's secrets the way morning fog learns, the shape of mountains. Slowly, quietly, completely. She knew about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the judges who took envelopes thick with cash, the politicians who owed favors, the businesses that laundered money through charitable donations. She knew which phone calls made Vincent Romano pace his office for hours. She knew which visitors made Vivian's voice turn sharp with fear. Knowledge is currency, and Isabella had been collecting it for years, without anyone realizing she was even in the market. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Isabella found it slipped under her apartment door, cream paper with gold edges that caught the hallway light. Her name was written in elegant script across the front. Ms. Isabella Martinez. Inside, embossed lettering announced the Romano family's anniversary celebration. Black tie required. RSVP requested. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Vivian's flowing handwriting. Looking forward to seeing you there. Isabella stared at the invitation for a long moment. She understood games, especially the cruel ones people like Vivian Romano played with people like her. This wasn't kindness. This wasn't inclusion. This was sport. Vivian wanted entertainment. She wanted to watch Isabella stumble through an evening she didn't belong to, wearing clothes she couldn't afford, surrounded by people who would treat her like an amusing mistake. She wanted her friends to witness the spectacle of the maid trying to play dress-up. Isabella folded the invitation carefully and placed it on her kitchen table. Then she made a phone call. "Maria?" she said when her sister answered. "I need a favor." 3 days before the party, Isabella took a train to the city. She walked through neighborhoods where the buildings stretched toward heaven and the people moved like they owned pieces of the sky. She stopped in front of a boutique where a single dress in the window cost more than she made in 6 months. But Isabella didn't go inside that boutique. Instead, she walked 2 blocks further to a small shop tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. The sign above the door simply read, "Elena's." The woman who greeted her was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes that missed nothing. Elena had been designing clothes for 40 years. She had dressed senators' wives and movie stars' daughters. She had created gowns for charity galas and wedding dresses for heiresses. But Elena also remembered what it felt like to be young and hungry, and dismissed by people who thought money was the only measure of worth. "I need something special," Isabella said quietly. "Something that will make people remember I was in the room." Elena studied her for a moment, taking in the careful way Isabella held herself, the intelligence behind her eyes, the quiet strength that radiated from her small frame. "What's the occasion?" Elena asked. Isabella's smile was small but sharp. Reckoning." They worked together for hours. Elena took measurements with the precision of a surgeon and the care of an artist. She asked questions about the venue, the guests, the purpose of the evening, and slowly, a plan began to form. "Black," Elena murmured, sketching quick lines on paper. But not just black. Black that absorbs light like a secret. Black that makes everything else in the room look like shadows. She showed Isabella the design. It was elegant without being flashy, sophisticated without being pretentious, the kind of dress that whispered power instead of shouting it. "The fabric will take 2 days to arrive," Elena said. "Can you come back Thursday for a fitting?" Isabella nodded. "How much will this cost?" Elena named a price that was fair but not cheap. Isabella didn't flinch. She had been saving money for 3 years, living carefully, planning for a future she couldn't yet see clearly. But this dress, this moment, felt like an investment in something, bigger than fabric and thread. "There's something else," Elena said, as Isabella prepared to leave. "You'll need the right accessories, jewelry that means something, shoes that make you feel tall even when you're standing still." Isabella thought about the small wooden box hidden in her bedroom closet, the box she hadn't opened in 2 years. "I think I know what I need." The night before the party, Isabella stood in her small apartment and opened that wooden box. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a necklace her grandmother had given her before she died. It wasn't expensive by Romano family standards. The silver was simple, the pendant small, but it had belonged to 5 generations of strong women who had survived wars and poverty and heartbreak. Isabella fastened the necklace around her throat and felt her grandmother's strength settle into her bones. She thought about tomorrow night, about Vivian's cruel smile and the laughter of people who had never known what it meant to be truly powerless. She thought about the secrets she carried, the knowledge that could reshape the Romano family's carefully constructed world. But mostly, she thought about the moment when she would walk through those doors and remind everyone in that room that invisibility was a choice, not a condition. The game was about to begin, and for the first time in 3 years, Isabella Martinez was ready to play. The Romano mansion blazed with light on Saturday evening. Every window glowed like a golden eye watching the city below. Luxury cars snaked up the circular driveway, their engines purring with the confidence that comes from never knowing want. Valets in crisp uniforms moved between vehicles like dancers in a choreographed performance of wealth. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble floors. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the sound of laughter that had never known struggle. Women floated between conversations in gowns that cost more than teachers' salaries. Men discussed business deals over glasses of whiskey older than their children. Vivian Romano stood at the center of it all, draped in emerald silk that matched her husband's money. Her smile was perfect, practiced, cold as winter marble. She had spent weeks planning this evening, orchestrating every detail to showcase the Romano family's power and influence. But tonight had an extra layer of entertainment. A private joke that only her inner circle understood. "Where do you think she is?" whispered Patricia Valdez, Vivian's closest friend and partner in cruelty. "It's already 7:30. Vivian checked her diamond watch with theatrical concern. Maybe she realized she doesn't belong here after all. Or maybe she's trying to find something appropriate to wear, added Catherine Morrison, another member of Vivian's circle. What does a maid even own besides uniforms? They giggled like schoolgirls sharing secrets, their laughter sharp, enough to cut glass. Around them, the party continued its elegant rhythm, unaware of the trap that had been set. Vincent Romano moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who owned everything he touched. At 55, he commanded respect through a combination of charm and barely concealed menace. Tonight, he was the gracious host, but his eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging faces, noting conversations, filing away information for future use. He approached his wife with 2 glasses of champagne. "Enjoying your party, my dear?" Vivian accepted the glass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's perfect, Vincent. Absolutely perfect. I notice we have some unusual additions to the guest list tonight." Her smile widened. "Just a little experiment in social dynamics. Sometimes it's amusing to watch people discover where they truly belong." Vincent studied her face for a moment. He had learned to read his wife's expressions like a map of dangerous territory. Tonight she wore the look of a hunter who had set the perfect trap. "Just remember," he said quietly, "surprises can cut both ways." Before Vivian could respond, a murmur rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. The orchestra continued playing, but somehow the music seemed to fade into background noise. Isabella Martinez stepped through the ballroom doors. The dress Elena had created was a masterpiece of understated elegance. Black silk flowed like liquid night, hugging Isabella's figure without clinging, suggesting strength without shouting it. The neckline was modest but striking, the hemline perfect, the cut so precise it seemed painted onto her body. But it wasn't just the dress. Isabella moved with a grace that turned walking into art. Her dark hair was pulled back in a chignon that would have made royalty envious, secured with simple pins that caught the light like stars. Her grandmother's necklace rested against her collarbone, the silver gleaming softly against her skin. She wore no other jewelry, carried no purse. Her makeup was flawless but subtle, emphasizing her natural beauty rather than masking it. Her shoes were simple black heels that added height to her small frame and confidence to her step. Everything about her whispered rather than shouted. But sometimes whispers carry further than screams. The crowd parted without conscious thought, creating a path through the ballroom, as if Isabella were magnetized. People who had been deep in conversation found themselves watching this woman who moved like she belonged in their world, but somehow transcended it. Vivian's champagne glass trembled in her hand. This wasn't the stumbling, nervous, inappropriately dressed maid she had expected. This was something else entirely. Someone else entirely. "Who is that?" someone whispered near the bar. "I don't recognize her," came another voice. "She's stunning." Isabella reached the center of the ballroom and stopped. She surveyed the room with calm eyes that seemed to catalog every face, every expression, every nervous glance. When her gaze found Vivian, she smiled. Not the desperate, grateful smile of someone trying to fit in. The knowing smile of someone who held cards no one else could see. "Vivian?" Isabella said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. "Thank you for the invitation. What a lovely party." Her accent was different. Not the careful, deferential tone she used while cleaning the Romano house. This voice carried education, confidence, the unmistakable cadence of someone accustomed to being heard. Vincent Romano's eyes sharpened. He had spent 30 years reading people, sorting threats from opportunities, friends from enemies. Something about this woman set off every instinct he had developed in decades of dangerous business. "Isabella," Vivian managed, her voice slightly higher than usual. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" Isabella's smile widened slightly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The silence stretched like a held breath. Around them, the cream of the city's elite stood frozen, sensing undercurrents they couldn't identify, but somehow understanding that the evening had shifted into uncharted territory. Patricia Valdez leaned closer to Vivian. "Is that really the maid?" she whispered, but Isabella heard. In the sudden quiet, every word carried like a bell. "The maid," Isabella repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe what I've been doing here." She looked directly at Patricia, and the older woman actually stepped backward. Though I prefer to think of it as research, Vincent Romano set down his champagne glass with deliberate care. Research into what, exactly? Isabella turned to face him, and for the first time all evening, her smile held an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Into how the other half lives, Mr. Romano, and more importantly, into how they think their secrets are safe. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The orchestra, sensing the shift in atmosphere, let their music fade to nothing. In the sudden silence, Isabella's next words fell like stones into still water. But we'll get to that. First, I believe someone owes me a dance. Vincent Romano's eyes narrowed as he processed Isabella's words. In his world, knowledge was power, and secrets were currency. Someone who spoke of research and hidden truths was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, sometimes both. A dance, he repeated slowly. Of course. He extended his hand with the practiced grace of a man who had negotiated with senators and silenced enemies with equal ease. But as Isabella placed her fingers in his, he felt something unexpected. Her hand was steady, no tremor of nervousness, no dampness of fear. She touched him like an equal. They moved to the center of the dance floor, and the orchestra, sensing their cue, began a slow waltz. Around them, the crowd formed a loose circle, pretending to resume their conversations while keeping their attention fixed on the unlikely pair. Vivian watched from the sidelines, her emerald dress suddenly feeling too tight around her chest. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to unfold. Isabella should have been stammering apologies by now, overwhelmed by the grandeur, making small mistakes that would provide entertainment for weeks to come. Instead, she moved across the floor with Vincent, like she had been born to ballroom dancing. Her steps were precise, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She followed his lead effortlessly, while somehow managing to make it appear as though she was guiding the dance herself. "You move well for someone in domestic service," Vincent murmured as they turned. Isabella's laugh was soft, but clear enough for nearby guests to hear. "You'd be surprised what skills people acquire when they're motivated to learn. And what motivated you?" Her dark eyes met his without flinching. "The same thing that motivates everyone in this room, Mr. Romano. Survival." Vincent spun her gracefully, and when she returned to his arms, he lowered his voice. "What game are you playing, Miss Martinez?" "The same game everyone else is playing," she replied. "I'm just better at it than people assumed." As the music swelled, conversations around them grew more animated. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by curiosity and speculation. Who was this woman who commanded attention without demanding it? Where had she learned to carry herself like aristocracy? "She's magnificent," breathed Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, the mayor's wife, to her companion. "Look at that dress, that posture. She's clearly from good family." "But Vivian said she was the maid," replied Judge Morrison's wife, confusion evident in her voice. "Maids don't move like that, darling. Maids don't wear clothes like that. Someone's been very clever about their true identity." The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. Each conversation added new layers to the mystery. Some guests began to remember seeing Isabella in the Romano house but recalled her differently now, not as invisible help, but as someone who had been observing, learning, waiting. Patricia Valdez clutched Vivian's arm. "This is a disaster. Everyone's staring. They're talking." Vivian's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. She's still just the help, no matter how she dresses." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept into her voice. Because the woman dancing with her husband moved with the confidence of someone who had never been anything but equal. And Vincent, who could spot deception from across a crowded room, was studying Isabella with the intensity he usually reserved for potential business partners or threats. The song ended, and Vincent stepped back with a slight bow. "Thank you for the dance." Isabella curtsied gracefully, a gesture so natural it seemed unconscious. "The pleasure was mine." As they separated, Vincent's mind raced through possibilities. 3 years of having this woman in his house. 3 years of confidential phone calls, private meetings, sensitive documents. 3 years of treating her like furniture while she absorbed everything around her. If Isabella Martinez was more than she appeared, then the Romano family had a problem larger than social embarrassment. Isabella moved toward the bar with unhurried steps, and conversations parted before her like curtains. The bartender, trained to recognize importance regardless of its packaging, immediately approached, with deference. "What can I get for you, miss?" "Champagne, please. Dom Perignon, if you have it." She said it casually, without checking the price, without the hesitation of someone unaccustomed to luxury. The bartender poured without question, and Isabella accepted the glass with a nod of thanks. "Isabella Martinez," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Thomas Kellerman, the district attorney, studying her with professional interest. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "No," she agreed, sipping her champagne. "We haven't. I have an excellent memory for faces, but I can't place you. Are you new to the city?" Isabella's smile was enigmatic. "I've been here for years, Mr. Kellerman. Perhaps you haven't been looking in the right places." Thomas felt a familiar itch, the same sensation he experienced when examining evidence that didn't quite fit the obvious narrative. "What business are you in?" "Information," Isabella replied simply. The word hung between them like a challenge. In Vincent Romano's circle, information was more valuable than diamonds and more dangerous than dynamite. People who dealt in information were either assets or enemies. There was rarely middle ground. "That's an interesting field," Thomas said carefully. "It's a necessary one." Amazing how much people reveal when they think no one. Important is listening. Across the room, Vincent was having an urgent conversation with his head of security, Marcus Webb. Their voices were low, but their body language spoke volumes. Marcus nodded grimly and melted into the crowd, beginning his own careful observation of Isabella. Meanwhile, Vivian's friends had regrouped around her like soldiers rallying after an unexpected attack. "We need to salvage this," Catherine Morrison whispered. "Everyone's acting like she's some mysterious socialite instead of your cleaning lady." "She is the cleaning lady," Vivian hissed back. "I don't care how she dresses or how she talks. She's still just the help." But even as she spoke, Vivian's certainty wavered, because the woman by the bar wasn't acting like help. She was acting like someone who belonged, someone who had always belonged, someone who was simply choosing to reveal herself for the first time. Eleanor Hartwell approached Isabella with the determined stride of someone accustomed to getting answers. "My dear," she said warmly, "you must tell me where you found that exquisite dress. I haven't seen craftsmanship like that since my last trip to Paris." Isabella turned with genuine pleasure. "It was custom made by a wonderful designer downtown, Elena's boutique. She has an extraordinary eye." "Elena Vasquez?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "She's dressed senators' wives, movie stars. Her waiting list is months long." "Yes, she's quite talented. We go back some years." The casual way Isabella spoke of a designer whose services cost more than most people's cars sent another ripple of speculation through the nearby guests. Someone who spoke of Elena Vasquez as an old friend was not someone who cleaned houses for a living. Dr. Michael Chen, the city's most prominent plastic surgeon, joined the conversation. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask, have we met before? There's something familiar about you." Isabella considered the question thoughtfully. "We may have crossed paths. I used to be quite active in charitable circles before I stepped back from public life." "Charitable circles," he repeated. "Which organizations?" "Oh, various causes, education primarily. Scholarship programs for underprivileged students." The conversation was drawing more listeners now. Vincent Romano found himself moving closer, his instincts screaming that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully controlled world. "Scholarship programs," Eleanor mused. "You know, there was a foundation years ago that did remarkable work in that area. The Adabio Foundation, I think it was called. Tragic what happened to them." Isabella's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. For just a moment, Something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps. Or recognition. Yes, she said quietly. Tragic indeed. Vincent Romano's blood turned to ice water. The Adabio Foundation. He remembered now. A family foundation that had provided scholarships to hundreds of students before. Scandal and financial ruin destroyed it. The founder's daughter had disappeared from society completely after her parents' deaths and the foundation's collapse. Isabella Martinez. Adabio. The letters rearranged themselves in his mind like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Marcus. Find everything on Isabella Adabio Martinez, now. But even as he sent the message, Vincent realized it might already be too late. Because if Isabella Martinez was who he was beginning to suspect she was, then she hadn't been cleaning his house for 3 years. She had been preparing for war. Marcus Webb's response came faster than Vincent had expected. 3 words that changed everything. She's Isabella Adabio. Vincent's phone buzzed again with additional details. The Adabio family had been philanthropists, educators, community leaders. Isabella's father had built schools in poor neighborhoods. Her mother had been a respected professor. The foundation had touched thousands of lives before everything collapsed under accusations of financial mismanagement and fraud. But the fraud hadn't been committed by the family. It had been orchestrated by people who wanted the Adabio Foundation's assets and influence. People who had connections to judges, politicians, and businessmen who moved in circles very similar to Vincent's own. Isabella Adabio hadn't just lost her fortune. She had been systematically destroyed by the very type of people now surrounding her at this party. Vincent looked across the room where Isabella continued her conversation with Eleanor Hartwell and Dr. Chen. She moved through their questions with the skill of someone who had once navigated charity galas and fundraising dinners as naturally as breathing. But underneath her composure, Vincent now recognized something else. Purpose. She wasn't here by accident. This wasn't coincidence. Isabella Adabio had spent 3 years in his house, learning his secrets, understanding his world, preparing for this exact moment. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Every confidential phone call she had overheard while dusting his office, every private meeting she had witnessed while cleaning his study, every document she had seen while emptying his trash. 3 years of intelligence gathering disguised as domestic service. Vincent moved toward his wife with deliberate calm, but his mind raced through damage assessment. What did Isabella know? What could she prove? What was her endgame? Vivian was still holding court with her friends. Her voice pitched higher than usual as she tried to maintain control of a situation spiraling beyond her comprehension. I don't care what anyone thinks, she was saying. She's still just a maid who got lucky with a dress. Vivian? Vincent's voice cut through her protests. We need to talk. Now. Something in his tone made her friends step back. Vivian followed him to a quiet alcove near the library doors, her emerald dress rustling with each agitated step. What's wrong? She demanded. Don't tell me you're impressed by this little performance. Her name isn't just Isabella Martinez, Vincent said quietly. It's Isabella Adabio Martinez. The color drained from Vivian's face. Even she remembered the Adabio Foundation scandal. The family that had fallen from grace so completely, they had simply vanished from society. That's impossible, she whispered. The Adabio girl disappeared years ago. She was some rich princess who couldn't handle real life. She didn't disappear, Vincent replied grimly. She survived, and she's been in our house for 3 years, watching, listening, learning everything we thought was private. Vivian's hands began to shake. What are you saying? I'm saying we've been played. Completely and thoroughly played by someone who has every reason to want revenge on people like us. Back in the ballroom, Isabella's conversation had drawn a small crowd. Stories were emerging from guests who suddenly remembered encounters with the Adabio Foundation years earlier. Your mother spoke at my daughter's graduation, said Judge Morrison's wife. Such an inspiring woman. What happened to your family was a travesty. The scholarship program saved my nephew's future, added another guest. He's a doctor now because of what your family did. With each story, Isabella's true identity became clearer to the crowd. But more importantly, the moral weight of the evening shifted. These people were beginning to understand that they weren't just witnessing a social prank gone wrong. They were watching a woman who had lost everything reclaim her rightful place in their world. Dr. Chen leaned closer to Isabella. If you don't mind me asking, what happened after the foundation closed? You just vanished. Isabella's smile carried years of pain and determination. I learned that survival sometimes requires becoming invisible. I needed to understand how my family was destroyed and by whom. That kind of education takes time. And now? Eleanor Hartwell asked gently. Now I'm ready to graduate. The words sent a chill through the nearby guests. There was something in Isabella's tone that suggested this evening was far from over. Thomas Kellerman, the district attorney, had been listening with growing interest. His prosecutor's instincts were fully engaged now. Miss Adabio, if you have information about what happened to your family's foundation, you should know that the statute of limitations hasn't expired on financial fraud cases of that magnitude. Isabella turned to face him directly. That's very good to know, Mr. Kellerman. I hope you'll remember you said that. Across the room, Vincent was making urgent phone calls while Vivian tried to process the implications of what they had discovered. Their private conversations, their business dealings, their connections to people who operated in legal gray areas, everything Isabella might have overheard during her time in their house. We have to discredit her, Vivian said desperately. Make people remember she's just the help. She's probably lying about who she is. But even as she spoke, more guests were recognizing Isabella. A retired judge approached with tears in his eyes. Isabella Adabio, he said warmly. I worked on some of your father's education initiatives. He was a good man. Your whole family was a credit to this city. Isabella embraced him gently. Judge Martinez, thank you. That means more than you know. What your family went through was criminal, he continued, loud enough for others to hear. The way you were railroaded, the evidence that was suppressed, the witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. Everyone knew it was orchestrated. Vincent's phone conversation ended abruptly. He returned to Vivian looking grim. We have a problem, he said quietly. A big one. How big? The kind that ends with federal investigations. Vivian's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound drew attention from nearby guests, and conversations paused as people turned to look. Isabella heard the crash and looked in their direction. For a moment, her eyes met Vincent's across the crowded room. In that instant, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Not anger, not hatred, something far more dangerous. Justice. Isabella raised her champagne glass slightly in their direction, a gesture that could have been interpreted as a toast. But Vincent understood it for what it was, a declaration of war. The evening's entertainment was about to begin in earnest. And for the first time in his criminal career, Vincent Romano realized he might have finally met an opponent who was smarter, more patient, and more motivated than he was. Isabella Adabio had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years learning their weaknesses, understanding their fears, gathering evidence they didn't know existed. Tonight wasn't just about social revenge. Tonight was about justice for a family destroyed, a foundation ruined, and a young woman who had been forced to sacrifice everything to survive. The reckoning Vivian had intended as a joke was about to become very real. But Isabella would be the one delivering the punchline. Unchline. And that's how Isabella Adabio turned humiliation into triumph, proving that dignity cannot be stolen, only temporarily hidden. Sometimes the people we overlook carry the greatest power, and underestimating them becomes our greatest mistake. Vivian Romano learned that night that true class has nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. What goes around truly does come around, and justice has a way of finding those who think they're untouchable. If this story inspired you, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below.